In today's video, we're going to talk about campaign settings and which you should choose for your own campaign. Because as you can see here in Google Ads, there's a lot of different campaign settings to choose from. And in most cases, some settings are much better to choose than others. And, I see a lot of debates online as well about, you should choose this setting over that setting. And I'm just going to walk you through the settings that I choose to use for the client campaigns that we're working with and, why we use these settings. And hopefully they help you with your own campaign creation process and in determining your own settings because you really want to make sure that, you have your campaign set up as effectively as possible to make sure that you're getting the most out of your spend. So with that being said, we're going to walk you through these campaign settings now and give you some insight into each of the settings that we're using. So at the beginning we have our campaign name, which is obviously just what you name the campaign at the very beginning, and you can name it whatever you want. Now, when it comes to conversion goals, then you want to make sure that they're account default goals and that the conversion goals here are only actions that you want the customer to take. So, for example, for this roofing campaign, we have lead form submissions and phone calls, whether those phone calls are from the ad itself or phone calls from the landing page. So there's only three different conversion actions that we're tracking here. And this is really important because you don't want to be giving Google like a ton of conversions to try and optimize for because it's just going to take much longer to optimize your campaign. So you don't want to be setting up conversion actions for, directions to a place, especially if you don't even have a physical shop, or contact visits to your contact page of your website when that isn't really or shouldn't even be considered a conversion in the first place. And so what you really want to do if you're tracking too many different conversions is come over here to goals and conversions and summary and making sure that any of these conversion actions that you do not want to be tracking as a conversion or a lead for your business is either removed, or else you can change it from a primary, meaning that Google tracks it as a conversion, to instead a secondary conversion action where Google will still collect data on it, but it's not being treated as an actual conversion for your campaign. And now back to the campaign settings. So when it comes to customer acquisition, there's no need to select bid for new customers only. You can just leave this unchecked because we're happy to be getting customers from wherever possible. It doesn't necessarily need to be, people that we haven't served before, especially if it's a service where, you can have repeat customers. And then for your marketing objective, usually in almost all cases, you're either going to want leads or sales. And you want sales if you're selling a physical or a digital product on your website. But if you're any type of a service-based business, then you're most likely going to be wanting to look for leads. Campaign status, then it's obviously just going to be enabled if you're running a campaign actively, and it's going to be paused if you don't have it running. Next one then is a big one, so it's your networks, and we only use the Google Search Network and we do not include Google Search Partners because what this is basically allowing a lot of other websites to show your ads, but usually the quality of the leads that you get from these search partners are just nowhere near as good as what you'd be getting from Google itself, and also just usually leads to a lot of wasted traffic. So you want to make sure that you have your search partners turned off unless you are really struggling for search volume, but I'd still recommend taking other measures to try and boost your search volume without using search partners. And you might also see an option for the display network here as well. And if you're running a search campaign, then you really want to make sure that the display network is also turned off. And then you have your locations, and you really want to make sure that your location targeting is set up properly because when you're initially creating a new campaign, is that first of all it's going to be selected to all countries, and you obviously want to make sure that that isn't the case, but you also want to make sure that it's selected to specific locations where you can put in your target area and do a radius around that, or else you can list off places by name that you are happy to target for your campaign. But the most important part of this is that it's almost very like conveniently hidden when you're creating a new campaign, is that you have this drop down here for location options, and this will by default be selected to presence or interest. But in almost 100% of cases, you want to make sure that this is selected present or presence, because if you have presence or interest selected, then you can more or less have people from absolutely anywhere seeing your ads and getting a lot of wasted traffic from people way outside your target area in completely different countries. And if you're offering a service-based business where location is heavily dependent, then you obviously want to make sure that you do not have this selected. So I just make sure that you go ahead and select presence for this in all cases. So if you're not used to creating Google Ads campaigns, I would just take note of that, just to make sure you remember when setting up your campaign at the beginning to always make sure that you select presence and not presence or interest, because it's one of the most common issues I see when it comes to people getting a lot of wasted, traffic and spend. Languages then, so obviously in this campaign we just have it set to English, and obviously you'd be running the campaign in whatever language is in the area that you're targeting. But one thing I would say about languages is that you do only want to use one language per campaign. You don't want to be running a campaign with multiple languages. And if you are in an area, for example, maybe in Canada, where there's two different languages, English and French, then you most likely want to make two separate campaigns for each language, as trying to overlap between two languages in the one campaign is just, you know, a very messy process and not worth doing. So you want to make sure that you have languages separated at the campaign level. And then when it comes to your daily budget, this completely depends on the locations that you're targeting and the cost per clicks of those keywords in the location that you're targeting as well. And I have a full video, it was actually the first video on the channel, about how to determine what your daily budget should be for Google Ads to see results. And now this campaign is for a small local business with a small daily budget. But usually I'd recommend, starting off with whatever daily budget is as high as possible for you that you'd feel comfortable with using. Like this is for a roofing campaign, for example, but in most areas, especially in Ireland, UK, USA, and so on, this kind of a daily budget just wouldn't be enough to be getting the results that you need. And I'd usually recommend starting out with a daily budget of 50 to 100, or even more in some cases, depending on where you're based and the cost per clicks of those keywords in your location. So there isn't any just daily budget that'll work for anyone. It really does depend on the location that you're targeting and the cost per clicks of the keywords. Bidding then is also a major topic in itself, which we have got separate videos on. And if you'd like to check those out, you can. But what we usually recommend doing with lead generation campaigns for service based businesses is running with maximized clicks at the beginning to gather enough relevant conversion data for Google Ads, where you basically set a maximum cost per click bid limit using the cost per clicks in the Google Ads keyword planner. So you basically, set an amount that you're willing to pay per click. And then we basically set our daily budget to about 10 times that. So then we know that we're giving Google a budget that we're easily going to be able to get 10 clicks per day. And with a high converting landing page, then that allows us to get at least one conversion a day. And then we're going to be able to switch over to maximize conversions like we have done in this case after a month. And you can also set a target CPA when you're running maximize conversions as well. It's completely optional, and we usually would recommend doing so. But this is just a campaign that we've been running that we've been happy with the amount of conversions we're getting and the cost per lead for some time. And we most likely will set a target CPA to try and bring that down even more. And we usually do, in almost all cases, recommend using a target CPA. And the real thing you want to make sure you do about that is to set it up for a little bit higher than what you're currently paying per conversion at the beginning. And then as you optimize your campaign and bring down that target CPA, then you can slowly bring that down by about 10 to 15% month after month. Because if you're currently paying, 50 per conversion and you set your target CPA to 30, then the chances are then you're just going to stop getting impressions altogether, because Google's algorithm isn't going to be able to get you conversions for that amount based on the previous conversion data that you gave it. So that's why you want to be as flexible as possible in the beginning when it comes to your target CPA. And then these last few settings here, so your automatically created assets, this should be set to off by default, and you just want to keep this as off. And then when your start and end dates, the start date will be by default whenever you started running the campaign. And your end date, then it's up to you if you want to set an end date, but we usually don't. And if we ever wanted to pause the campaigns for any reason, we can just pause it at any point, but that's completely up to you. Broad match keywords then is something you really want to make sure that you have off. Usually it is off by default when you're making a campaign, but it's also just worth taking note of, don't have this set on, or else all your keywords are going to be set to broad match by default, and you won't be long burning through your budget if all your keywords are broad matched. So that's also just something to be aware of. And for the rest of your campaign settings here, almost all of these settings are, you want to just leave as default, and you don't need to do anything to change these. When you're looking at ad rotation, then maybe is the last one, we usually recommend going with optimize. where out of the three ads in each ad group, Google is just going to show the one that is performing the best, the most over the other two. So you're not going to have, each of your three ads getting the exact same amount of views, even if one is performing way better than the other. We'd rather show the ad that is performing best the most. So that's why we go with optimize. But these are the campaign settings that we're using for this campaign. And if you're struggling to understand, which campaign settings you should use for your own, I hope this video helped when and gave you some context as to why we use these different settings, and you know gave you a bit more insight into the type of settings you should use as well for your own campaign. And if you do have any questions at all about your campaign settings inside Google Ads or anything else related to Google Ads in general, feel free to leave a comment down below. And if you do like this kind of Google Ads related content as well, feel free to leave a like and subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video.